Good morning. Hello, good morning. Yeah. Today we're just going to kind of discuss different aspects of lighting, a lot of definitions, and some design consideration when looking at the site, trying to figure out where lights should be placed, what light fixtures might be the best ones to select, and just give a really broad overview of part of the process of creating a lighting plan for our land development plans. I hope everybody has a handout. A lot of this stuff is definitions, terms for reference in the future. We're going to be looking at some of the basics of the lighting, the definitions, the design process, and the design standards. A lot of this stuff is pretty self-explanatory. Why do you need lighting? They say for enhancing the visibility, but we know that we need to make sure that we meet all the requirements for the municipality so that the plan can be approved. So on our plans, we typically show, one of the first things we need to look for is what are we trying to light? Usually it's sidewalks and parking lots. So that is the area lighting. We'll look for street lighting, a little bit more linear. Pathway is definitely a smaller linear type of thing that might include a different type of light fixture. There's accent lighting, which a lot of times we do not concern ourselves with, especially with the plans that we submit, because with a lot of accent lighting, the light shoots up at like a flagpole or the building or something like that. And the way that all the calculations are done, it's what hits the ground. So if a light shoots up, it doesn't hit the ground. Those lights fixtures do not actually count towards the calculations. And there's also the decorative, which might be borough has their street lights. Patton Township and residential has like an 8-foot limit to their residential lights. Those are more decorative lights. They have different challenges to look into and consider when having to lay that out. So, and a lot of times the architect may have certain fixtures that they have placed on their building, and that's something that we have to also consider, take into account, and adjust properly. But many times we don't have any of that information up front. So there's just a couple of different design guidelines that I try to follow when I'm doing these kind of designs or assuming lighting for submission for approval. Another consideration is cost for our clients. If we can eliminate the number of poles, we can save the client's cost. That means less conduit, most likely, less fixture tops, if we select the correct fixture type. And of course, the municipality requirements are always what drives what we're looking at. The college probably has the most stringent lighting requirements. They have become much easier to meet only because of LED lighting. Patton has the requirement for pre and post curfew lighting plans to be separated out. So you have to go with it. You have to prepare a separate plan for those. The borough does not allow you to have any spillover of the property line of the light fixture. So you have to be very careful with that, especially on our downtown sites where the buildings are almost the entire site. So each municipality, you have to kind of really look at their ordinances, be able to know what you're looking for, and a lot of times they're listed under illumination is where you'll find the most important regulations. All right, I'm going to open. I've been always using visual lighting software. It is created by Acuity Lighting Brands, which is one. The lighting manufacturers, it's very strange. There's only maybe like 3 actual manufacturers, but there's a million different names and different sub-companies. It's kind of like the pharmaceuticals, where you have one huge pharmaceutical, they have like a million different sub-brands. Acuity lighting, though, does create visual lighting. We have currently one single license that can be installed as many computers we want, but only one person could be in it at a time. And in the next session that we do, it's going to be a lot more specific to how to use the software. I want to just use it today to demonstrate how choosing light fixtures can be done, or what you're looking for when you're choosing light fixtures. So I already have a sample project that I started. I'm going to open that up. So this is just I just did this morning, pretty rectangular, large building, some parking lots, property line, building setbacks, those kind of things. First thing that you'll probably notice is the big grid of red. If you zoom way in, they have nothing there. It's nothing there because there's no light fixtures in this design currently. That zone of red is called a calculation zone. You can make it any size. I try to keep it outside of our property line. It's where I can check the statistics for any kind of trespass that there might be on the plot project. The green area, that is the statistics zone. A lot of the ordinances, this is the main between trespass, which is how much light exits the site, and the paved area is what I usually call it. The area where is paved or any kind of pedestrian access, pedestrian or vehicle access, that's where your main calculations need to be made. So in this case, it's already been set aside as a separate statistics zone, and that's the green area. And the software allows you to have a little bit of a readout on the side here. As you can see, there's no lights currently in there. The big white box is the building. One very key point of information that we need when we're doing lighting is the height of a building, or some sort of rough calculation on the height, because this software will actually take that into account. One really strange thing about lighting plans and how they're calculated is they do not use landscaping or topography in the calculations. So no topography. Every site is perfectly flat, which doesn't make sense in real life, but that's how everything works in the calculations. Same with trees. You can't say, oh, those trees are going to block the light. There is no calculation for that vegetation to be used in the process. So when you have lights very close to a property line, you run the risk of having trespass onto a next door property. You have to keep that in mind. There's no easy way to buffer with landscaping or have it say it's 20 feet higher in elevation. So even though the site in real life would block the light, it doesn't matter with these calculations. So really the building is the only thing that matters with the calculations, because it has a reflectance of the surface of the building that will actually push the light back out. So in my sample here, or example, I essentially just went through, did a typical tube A. We got 18, 24, 18 with a 5-foot sidewalk and a 5-foot gap between the buildings. A lot of our, 9 or 10 stalls long, 9 feet wide. Pretty simple stuff. There's no utilities, which is a very key thing to always keep in mind. Also, we want to make sure that we don't place any light fixtures on top of underground utilities. And since the vegetation is not taken into place, we also want to try to stay out of where we know vegetation is going to be placed. So parking islands are not the best location for lights, because usually we are required to have a tree in that location. So I'm going to skip ahead to a lot of the definitions, which is on the back of the first page. This will help build up a little bit of your background understanding of what we're looking for and what the ordinances are asking for. I tried to give examples throughout so you can make real-world comparisons of what you're looking at and what is actually being asked of the design. So the very first definition we have is a lumen. That is the light that actually comes from the light fixture. College Township, that used to make a big deal about lumens. One of the things that has changed dramatically with LED lighting is that you do not have to worry about a lot of those calculations anymore because they take up much less of the required or the allowable numbers from the townships. But in this case, lumens, they kind of give you an idea. 800 lumens is a standard 60-watt bulb. So you can kind of get an idea, okay, 800 lumens. Great. So that just goes down through there, kind of gives you an idea, something to reference it to, but that's only the intensity of the light coming from the fixture itself. The next one down, foot candle, is what the measurement on the ground surface is, and that's essentially 1 lumen per square foot. And that is what we are trying to meet with a lot of the ordinances or the standards that have been brought forward. Most of the ordinances around here, paved area should be a minimum 0.2 foot candles per square foot. Averaged, let's put it, 0.2 minimum. The average paved area should be 2 foot candles on any of the paved area. So once I put a couple lights in here, you'll see how that can be adjusted.
Can you say it again?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Paved areas, typically, I try to find a 0.2 as the minimum foot candle. On this one, it says 0.5 parking lots is the ideal. You're allowed 0.2 as the minimum. But the overall average of like this green area right here on the screen would have to be 2 foot candles total. So you might have a 0.2 somewhere, but you might have a 5 somewhere else, and eventually it will average out. You want to be at least 2.
Is that what's listed off to the right?
Off to the right, yep, right here. Here, I'll throw a light in here real quick. I have kind of a default palette of light fixtures that I always start with because I like how they work, and they have been fairly reasonably priced when we first started using them. For a long time, we didn't use LEDs because they were too cost prohibitive. That price has come down dramatically. These were some of the first ones that were actually reasonable in price for the clients, and they do have a very good coverage and good cutoff. I'm going to say here, I also went through and I labeled these with what type of distribution they have. So I'm just going to pick this one and hurry up and place this. Another key requirement that varies from different municipalities is the height of the pole that you're allowed to have. So always look that up. Some townships 25, some are 20. In some situations, it's 8. So you really need to make sure you pay attention to the use of the property, the zoning of the property, and which township or municipality you're in, and that will have different requirements for it. So I'm going to put this at 25 because that's usually the maximum that most townships in this area have. Site lighting or sports lighting, completely different set of ordinance. We don't do a lot of that. I'd rather give that off to someone, a professional who does that more often. We had the recent pickleball / tennis courts that could not meet adequately the borough's requirements due to height, and eventually that project got postponed for other reasons, I think. But one of the things that we were fighting with the borough was to allow us to increase the height to make a better uniformity for the players. That didn't go through, but so we had to add additional light poles and to light the courts in order to get things to be up to standard for play. All right, so we have this light pole. It's at 25 feet. With LED lights, I like to place them mid of a parking lot, usually on a parking line, so it's less chance people's going to run into it with their car if they go over the curb or go too far. And typically on our details, the pole should be 3 foot behind the face of the curb. So after you get doing this a little bit, you'll get used to how the scaling works and you kind of see what's going on. So as soon as I place that light, nothing happens because you have to hit the calculate button. It will go through, it will analyze, and it will give you numbers for the foot candle at that grid mark. So that's a very key. This grid is a 10 by 10. That is our typical grid that we use. You can adjust that to make numbers work in your advantage if possible. I haven't seen any ordinances yet that require a certain grid spacing. So keep that in mind too if you're having troubles on a local area. But no contours show up because for some default reason they do not. And there we go. So you just have to go in and turn them on. So with one light fixture, these are the contours for the light, the foot candles. So we only use up to, I believe, see, it's not even, the lights aren't showing up right now, the labeling. The lowest one is a 0.2, or no, I'm sorry, a 0.1. Then it's a 0.25, 0.5, and this is probably a 1. Let me see, I can probably, yeah. So you can, in the software, you can change all these if you need to. I usually keep them the way they are. Sometimes I'll chop it down to a 0.2 only because that's what the trespass number is allowed on most properties. So you can see this one pole with this type of light fixture can throw almost the entire way across the paved area to get your 0.2. We're looking at 0.2 is right around the face of the curb. Typically that works really well. That means the way I solve this issue is put some building mounted lights on there to help bring up that light foot candle a little higher in this area. But it usually covers a bay of 10 parking spaces very well. Over here on the side, you can see my average is now 4.4. My maximum is 3.2. But because I have all these zeros over here, the other items do not fill out. Those are ratios. College Township, I believe, is the only one that actually requires the ratio. They want you to be 5 to 1 or under. So in that case, if you have a minimum of average of 2, that means your minimum foot candle in the whole parking area must be a 0.4, which is quite a lot brighter than what's required typically. So I would go around, I'd place these lights. I have a pretty good idea. Okay, I could put another one halfway in this bay that will really light this area up, another one up here. Start to see how the lights kind of fill the area. We're going to skip over. We'll come back to some of these definitions. A lot of them are the first section of definitions cover a lot of the calculation side of things, or the specifications of the actual light fixtures. So we already discussed lumens and foot candles. That's what the foot candles is what you're going to look for the most for design purposes on the plans in the software. The CCT, or the color temperature, that's usually something architects are concerned about. I typically use a 4000 K, which is daylight. But the lower the number, the more orange the light will become, the softer is what they refer to it. The higher the number, the more blue light you actually start to see. So that can affect how your site looks. If you want it to be a warmer parking lot, you would go a little bit lower, but I find 4000 a very good starting point. Sometimes the light fixtures that are chosen for us do not have that setting, so you try to get 3500, 4000, somewhere around. Some of the warehouses I've done do 5000, just so that they can be a little bit brighter, a little bit whiter, so truck drivers or anything like that can see everything that's going on a little bit differently. the CCT goes hand in hand a lot with the color rendering index, or the CRI. That is how accurate the light from that fixture can render real world objects. So green looks green like under the sun. So you go down through there. A lot of the light fixtures, they hit 70. And that is a very common number. Most of the light fixtures I use has a color rendering index of 70. So, and you can read more of the why it's important, what it's used for. The next, well, then we have beam angle. I don't usually concern about that. All of our beams essentially need to be straight down. That is to help provide full cutoff, which is a very common requirement of the townships. That means no light can go above the horizontal line of the fixture. The issue with that is when they want decorative lanterns or something like that, you cannot control that as easily with those, because essentially the light will reflect off of that glass and some will go up. Again, I have found, we'll get into that real quick. Light pollution is a lot like the trespass. It's the amount of light. Whenever it's real dark, you can see light pollution in town. It glows. You look at, you know where State College is. It has a glow to it from the lights. That is considered light pollution. It would be very difficult to eliminate completely light pollution, but that is what a lot of the requirements are trying to do, is keep all the light facing down, none of it going up. Same with dark sky compliance. Dark Sky is an organization that sets up standards. They also that are trying to eliminate that extra light pollution. Light trespass. I briefly mentioned it before. This is one of the biggest ones that the townships can look at. It's easy to recognize. It's essentially, let me see here. If they have a maximum amount of light that can go across your property. Typically it's 0.2, but it does depend on your uses and your zoning. So if this is a commercial use and this is a commercial use, you may be allowed to do 0.5. Every township's different, how they do it, if it's zoning, if it's use, you just have to read the ordinance and find out for that particular site. If I would take and place another, yes, yes, it has different requirements. So if it's a commercial, like I'm working with this in Benner Township, there's commercial right next to residential. If it's commercial to commercial, I'm allowed to 0.5 at spillover, trespass. If it's commercial to to residential, it's a 0.2. So it does depend on, but not all townships call it out that way.
I remember in the past, if you get permission from the adjacent property owner, do townships allow, like if I have a commercial project and you're gonna put a whole bunch of light on me, and I'm all for that.
You'd have to, that would be a case-by-case scenario. You'd have to check with the townships.
I seem to remember that we've done that in the past, where we've done light easements or something, I think it was called.
You may be, like I said, it would all depend.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would all depend on if the township would even allow it.
Yeah, I know some townships do. I just
It's,
don't remember which ones.
That was a state property,
but it, again, it might not even depend on the township. It may be the person reviewing the plan if they'll allow that or not. Because I don't know that there's a lot written in the ordinance saying about that.
Yeah, if it's a zoning requirement, it's set in stone, so you'd have to get something formal in writing. And some ordinances will allow it more like a decision by the council to grant something like that. Depending on where that requirement's embedded in the ordinance.
So
On the dark sky,
yes.
like generically, it has impact on the environment.
No, typically our clients just want the plan approved. So as long as we meet all the requirements of the municipalities,
As long as they get the lighting that they need,
yeah.
they really haven't been too conservative.
I don't know if there's very few, I mean, there's some clients that ask us to use a certain light fixture, but that's essentially it, and that's more of a decorative or other reasons because, hey, this is what we have a lot of stock with, or, you know, we use this manufacturer because they give us a good rate on price and stuff like that, so.
If you'll ever do run into that, like in coastal areas, the dark skies are helping with like turtle nesting and getting them back, once they hatch, getting them back. So if they can't see the moon, then they don't know which way to go, that kind of thing. Up here, I don't know exactly the impacts, other than it has impacts. If you were to ever get that question from a client.
Yeah.
I know sheets,
Depends on the neighborhood.
Yeah, it really does. It's,
Who lives in the neighborhood, you know,
the convenience stores are really concerned about lighting, especially when you need the gas canopies, but they have their own lighting consultants.
right, and they also have special requirements. The ordinances can be very specific. There's a whole section, like I said earlier, about sports lighting. There's a whole section on gas stations. So gas stations can be super bright under the canopy, but you also still cannot have a certain amount of light even come out the sides of the canopy. So they can be fairly tricky, but that's why we let them do it, because they do it all the time. Now, in my example, I was with trespass. Like I said, that's one of the easiest things that the townships can check on your designs. And that's one of the reasons why I like this light fixture. If you notice, this is still a 25-foot light fixture. This lights the same amount forward, but in this case, this fixture has a very sharp cutoff, meaning that very little light goes behind it. And this is a 15-foot setback is what I created here. This would be perfectly fine. It meets all the trespass requirements that are typical of a .2. Nowhere does that go over. I bring that up because this was a very difficult, and this LEDs essentially changed the way we design lighting. If we were doing this before LEDs became economically feasible, we would have used a metal halide. They have very poor control on them. You would not put your light fixture in that 15-foot area, because you instantly would go over the setback with trespass, and we would put those light fixtures out in the parking lot islands. So that changed a lot as far as design and layout of lighting. And we would put it in the islands only because we couldn't control the backlight, and it would be enough backlight, it would light the parking stalls behind the fixture. So LEDs made everything much easier because they are much more controllable. They can actually make the LEDs face certain and direct it. The LED panels, what they do is they have a panel, and they may have, 40, or in this actually on these they have 18 little LED lamps. Each one of those can actually be aimed individually from the manufacturer. So that helps with control where the light goes. It allows them to actually put little shields on each one of those to help prevent the amount of light going backwards and essentially cutting down the chance for trespass over your property line. I don't have a good example of like a metal halide or anything like that, but so far those LEDs have taken over all the designs just because of that flexibility that they give. And also, now that the prices of manufacturing has come down, they also are cheaper to actually run. They use less energy, give the same kind of performance, and in most cases can give better performance because of the control. But that is probably the biggest change in lighting that I've experienced. I included in the definitions to LED light fixtures information about them, the metal halide, and the high pressure sodium was another one. Each have their pros and cons, but everything these days are light LEDs. Also incandescent. This is one issue, one thing that we get quite a bit. If we are doing a residential subdivision and the township wants to see a light on the house, it's very hard to model those because manufacturers don't have those small light bulbs modeled. So it's difficult to meet that requirement. We can fudge it a little bit, but essentially those aren't there for lighting an area. It's more of a here's my front door type of thing. That works great for residential. It's not necessary with commercial. They do have lots of wall fixtures that tend to be more commercial type style. But when you get a chance, read down through these, you can see why LED has been so successful in taking over all the design. I mean, some of the lights used to take a while to warm up in order for the light to even come on. The cold weather affected them, yeah. You get a lot of orange light with the metal halide. You could tell right away if you were driving down the street. If you see orange light from a light fixture, that's an older fixture that's probably a metal halide. If it's a really bright, almost blue-white color, it's probably a high-pressure sodium. That was one of their traits. So it was really easy to tell these things apart. With LED, not only can you do the color rendering, some of them can be dimmed, which is also a big factor. The metal halide and high-pressure sodium could not be dimmed. It was either on or off, which caused a problem with Patton Township because they needed a pre- and post-curfew. So you'd have to figure out what lights could be turned on and off at the curfew time, but still allow enough for safety purposes. And you'd have to coordinate with whoever was running the conduits. They had to run extra conduits, different wiring to make those lights on a different circuit in order to do those. Anymore, you can just have one controller and say, okay, all the lights need to be dimmed to 25% of the total light, and it's done with LEDs. I don't know if we switched over to LEDs. I think we still have probably metal halide. No, I think we did switch to LEDs. Yeah. I know the next door switched to LEDs, and you can see the difference a little bit. I'd have to check it out, but I'm pretty sure it's LEDs. The last definition I have here is really the Illuminating Engineering Society, or IES. You will hear that IES everywhere once you get into the software. They basically set the technical standards for all the lighting. They come up with the calculations. They have a lot of the ordinances refer to the IES design handbook. So not as much of a, you need to know that, but you will see it a lot. All right. The next section we looked at, just talked about a little bit. There is literally hundreds and thousands of different combinations that light fixtures can have. I already mentioned that there's like 1 million different lighting manufacturers, even though they're all under one or two big companies. You have Lithonia. Actually, I think Lithonia is part of the Acuity brands. So there's a lot. So to narrow it down to just a few that work really well is what we need to do, since we're not necessarily looking for, we're looking to make sure we find the fixtures that meet the requirements of the townships. If I go into the software, there's a schedule. These are all LSI as a manufacturer of lights. Like I said, they were one of the earliest to make an affordable LED, and they have a really good cutoff on them. So I've been using their fixtures for quite a few years now, so I'm fairly familiar with them. I don't know how many people have seen like the spec sheets that are required by different townships. There's so many different options as far as considering what light what light fixture actually gets installed. I've tried to narrow it down to these just to give you an idea, like this catalog number. Most people would say, yeah, it's a bunch of numbers and jibber jabber. It is. But all of these mean something. SLM is the slim line of products. It's a little bit thinner thickness of the light fixture. LED it's LED. I don't know why a lot of companies still designate LED and they don't even make the other types anymore. 18, actually I'm gonna open this. Let me see, hit new. Just to give you an idea. Bummer, okay.
Does this information come with the software?
No.
You have to download it into the software.
Good question. Okay, good. Let me see here. Let me cancel this.
Along with that, the specs are created by the manufacturer, I assume, not like a third party.
The spec sheets are from the manufacturers, but they are tested according to the IES standards. Okay, so on the S drive, under design, there's a folder created called lighting design. In there, I've moved, it used to be just IES files was out in the middle of the design folder. So I moved it all into here, trying to keep everything accurate or in there. These are some of the light fixture companies that I've downloaded over the years. So we have 99 different companies or folders here of light fixtures. It is crazy. Like I said, it's crazy the number of choices that we have to look through and to evaluate. So one of the ones I use a lot, LSI. Inside of there, they have all these different categories of light fixtures in there. So LED, outdoor, 2 different indoor, all sorts of different options. Wall mounts, indoor. I usually we go to that LED, and then you can go, it just keeps breaking it down farther and farther and farther in categories. I know where the ones that I use the most are located. They're in the area too. I'm not sure. I guess they had too many models that they couldn't put them all in one folder. I don't know. These are the different lines of light fixtures. Like I had mentioned before, I like using the SLM. So we go into there. Inside that category, they actually have it broken down again. 9 to 18 and 24 to 42. Those are the number of light emitting diodes, the LEDs, in each panel that you can put into the light fixture. So the smallest that they have is 9 light, 9 things in a panel, and essentially what they do is they just keep adding increments. So you got 9, and you can have 18. I think there's a 12. So I usually start my design with an 18. It seems to be a midpoint on the design. But here you can see 9's the least amount that they have. They have a 12. They have an 18. And then that other folder has the 24 to 36, I think, or 48. So you can get some really large light fixtures. You have to talk to the sales reps. You don't typically talk directly to the manufacturers. There's several lighting companies in the area. LaFace McGovern is based out of Pittsburgh. We've used them for designs. That's who I learned most of my lighting information from early on. And then there's also Repco 2 is another local distributor of different brands. They are the ones that carry the LSI.
But if anybody uses the fixtures that you already have in the library, those are pretty affordable.
The pricing has changed quite a bit. There may be even cheaper ones now. I just know that the LSI, when we were first introduced to them, they were running at $500 a fixture, which was like a sixth of what everybody else was running. They were all like $3,000 a fixture, and they came out with these, and they were at $500 a fixture. And we're like, done. And they have a really good, like I said, a really good pattern as far as the cutoff.
To help you out, I mean, most of the time, the client says, hey, I'm just trying to meet the ordinance, I want the cheapest thing. We get the recommendation from John, just like he said, hey, let's use the SLMs from
Yep.
Cree or
From LSI.
LSI.
Yep.
We put them in there, and then when the job, and then we communicate that to the client. Usually then when the job goes out to bid, they'll come back and say, hey, we're good, you know, they tell their contractor, hey, bid the LSI lights as spec. Sometimes the contractor will come back and say, I can get the acuity lights, they're cheaper.
Right.
That's fine, but when they do that, then we have to give them John, and he has to check them to make sure that they work as well.
West College Self-Storage just went through that.
Right.
We submitted the LSIs, but then the contractor came back with different light fixtures, but in that, I think Mark's, we're responding that the contractor is responsible for doing the photometrics and stuff. And
But,
he
yeah.
resubmitted.
Where this answers your question is, most of the time, we're not doing the homework on the pricing.
Right.
upfront.
Right.
We're getting them a suggestion,
It-
and they're telling us whether they want that.
Through the submittal process, they can change it
Yes.
to a price point that
Yes.
works better.
If there's something that's meets all the requirements
Yes.
of our originally approved plan.
And that during the submittal process, that's when they'll look at it and make sure.
Mm-hmm.
We got submittals for the Mount Nittany building out at Soft Trees. They came back and said, we were using a very specific light fixture because that's what the
That's what-
hospital has,
mhm.
right?
Exactly.
Like, we got a pile of these in our warehouse, so we want to use the same thing. So if we have to replace fixtures, we already have them. But then the contractor came back and said, yeah, but I can buy these cheaper. And then, remember, we went through
Yep.
and put them in, and they weren't.
They didn't meet the
they
same.
didn't meet the standards. So they went back. So sometimes there's a process with the client, but we don't usually do the homework up front.
No.
As far as saying, hey, here's the pricing. Now, we suggest one and go from there.
Yeah, and more and more I've seen the LSI seems to be harder to get in this area. So, we have the big height lighting, used to be the big place that all the contractors went to get their lighting, and they didn't have as many of the LSI fixtures. So we get a lot of, hey, can we substitute this light fixture for this? That happens quite a bit. So it may be time to start looking and going back through and finding out what fixture is the most common in our area, and if we can get it to make it work as well as what these fixtures do. So,
So you're talking about the number of individual LEDs within the fixture and how that's
Mhm.
kind of scales. Is that individual LED, is that a universal standard across the industry, or does every manufacturer have a little bit different size of that, where it'll throw off your calculations if, an 18 panel LED from manufacturer A and B is going to throw off?
they'll be
different
completely different.
Yeah, okay.
Completely different.
Coke and Pepsi.
Yeah,
Yeah.
John, do you have a cut sheet?
sure. Let me see here.
For just for one of them?
I thought I had one in this folder.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, there it was. This might be an older version. Let me get the other one. No, it gets submitted typically with this, with the,
Some of them. I thought it would be helpful to
right,
show,
right.
like, where the numbers,
Let me see.
like how you can pick the components of the light off of your cut sheet.
Yeah, and part of it is there's just so many different options. There's just no way to keep track, for me, of every single manufacturer and all the different options. So I do rely on the distributors, like I said, Repco2 or LaFace McGovern, to suggest what light fixtures are working at this time, or what is the way to go. So this is the slice medium outdoor light, which I've been using for a while now. You can see this one looks like it has one panel in it. But if you go down through here, there's an example option here. This is their example, SLM LED 36L. So you would have to go, okay, so prefixes SLM, that's your slice medium I don't know if that's, yeah, slice medium. And then the light source is LED. The next thing on here is 36L. So you go the whole way down to 36. That means it's 36,000 lumens. Next is that it's a silicone lens. That's what the SIL stands for. That's one I forgot all about. This one here is usually a very important one, the distribution. So there's type 2, type 3, type 4, 5 wide, forward throw, automotive merchandise. That's a new one. I haven't used that one yet. Left corner, right corner. Some of these were never available until LEDs came along. You did not have the options for right corner, left corner. And that essentially means that you will only fill light in one 90-degree quadrant of a circle. So you can get fairly tight cutoffs in a corner of a parking lot now. Or in our case, we used the right hand, left hand in the corners of the paddleball courts so that they didn't go farther off the site.
That's where the shields are already manufactured on the
Correct. Or the diodes are already aimed in that one direction to go that way. Orientation, you can actually have you may have your light fixture facing forward, but your panels rotated so that they throw to the side. And that's useful for aesthetics, really. You want your light fixtures all to be facing the same direction, but you need some extra light in the other direction. You can have them face that way. And that's one of the benefits of having the modular panels in the light fixtures. It's just basically you pop it out, rotate it, and pop it back in. Voltage, driver, some of these things I usually don't worry about. Voltage and drivers are two of them. Here's your color temperature. Let me see if I can zoom in some here. Your color temperature, that's your number that we talked about earlier. 40 represents 4,000 CT. That's typical daylight color of light. This one only has the 70 color. That's how close is it to the actual, when you look at it, what's the color look like. Then you have all these extra controls that typically I do not worry about. And then finish also, we don't usually worry about. That's usually up to the owner. And then this last one is important. This IL, this is what LSI calls it. IL is the integral louver, and that helps to stop the light from going in backwards direction. Some people call it HS for house shield. Just different manufacturers call it different things. So you have all these different ideas, and you end up with this big, long, huge number of letters and numbers that mean something to somebody when they look at it. I don't think that it really makes a difference to the municipalities, but it can make a big difference when you're picking a light fixture for your site.
Yeah, well, a couple of those are important because of the throw and
Yes, the throw and the lumens,
yeah.
Those two are usually the two that I look at the most. And the color temperature, that gets picked. Some clients like it to be 5,000. Most don't have a preference, so I just use 4,000. So this information here, those three probably are the biggest ones, and the inside louver or the house side shield. Those four make the difference on the lighting fixtures when you're selecting them. Yes. So, like I was showing before, every single manufacturer has multiple lines of lighting fixtures and how they look. So there's your SL. So all of these give you every single option that's available for that one light fixture. So you have to kind of narrow it down. You have to know what you're kind of looking for. That's why I kind of saved, you could export a default list of light fixtures, and that's also saved in that folder on the S drive so that you can instantly load that or import that in and have some light fixtures picked already, not having to go through every single one and try to find the exact one that you want. So in this case, here's one that's 18 LEDs, forward throw with a 50 color and a 70, and it has an inside louver. So that would be A different color is really the only thing on that one that's different from a lot of the other ones. If I go back to the software, I want to pick, so like I said, I already have these in here. The ones that I already inserted into the software, or into the plan, shows the quantity already too here. That was a forward throw with a house side shield, or an IL. Different, like I said, different manufacturers have different namings. So this one in this case is the IL. So that was a forward throw. If I go with, let me get out of here. I'm going to, whoops. If I place an orient and I change this to be a type 2, I'm going to just put it up here, and it's still 25 foot, so same height, same light fixture, same, all numbers except for the distribution's different. What you'll see is that one throws more left to right than what this one throws forward. Now 3 is a little bit more compact. Let me see here. Let me see if I can do that. Let's see if I can. And every time I place a light, you can, the calculations get brackets around it, meaning that it's out of date. So you can always tell if you're looking at the most recent numbers. So there's your, that's a 2, the 3, the 4 looks a little odd because it's hitting the building. So that light fixture is a little bit different looking, but, and then, let me see. The type 5 throws in all directions. These are very useful for large parking lots of multiple rows. You can save a lot of light posts by using these. And the LSI ones work really well as far as the amount of cover that you can get from one light fixture. So that's a 5 square.
Picture of what that looks like, the ones that throw in all directions.
It looks exactly the same as all the other fixtures. It's how the LEDs are in the panels in the LEDs. Now, you might get a little shadow from the
I
pole.
was going to say there'd be the full shadow.
Yes, but you're using, it's a 4-inch pole.
Days
So
of forehead lights pretty much show that.
I don't see a reason for them. I mean, there is, but it's, you can do it just as easy with this. It depends on where your islands are too. No, I mean, you just, well,
Nobody's ever commented on
no, I've never had an issue with it.
It doesn't calculate the full shadow.
It only calculates where there's dots on the grid. So I've never seen it actually
Yeah.
show, I mean, oh, here.
At most, you would have a 2-vent light then, if you wanted to make the full shadow.
It, right.
When you're placing, do you have other plans up to make sure you're avoiding trees?
Yes.
Utilities?
This, what you see here was done in CAD. It's imported in. So I typically would take our MD drawing and import it in. This software is terrible at rendering AutoCAD. Text, it comes up squiggly lines. Some stuff comes through, other things do not. Line types do not show up. All this looks like a normal plan in AutoCAD. This is dashed line work, all that. This software does not render it very well. So that's one of the trickier things to do. And it imports everything in. So I spend time deleting everything out of these drawings a lot of times because you don't need contours. So I'll get rid of all the contours, all the demos, layers. I think I already did it on this one. No, here we go. So this is just right from our template type of thing. Here is all the layers that you normally would have. If there was line work on that, it would show up in here. Now you can go through and turn individual layers on and off, but it's not worth it. Right now I have it set to, well, You have these 3 states: editable, uneditable, and invisible. So usually before I export it back to CAD, I turn the line work to invisible so it doesn't bring that back. Uneditable means it's just grayed out. You can't move it. That's where I usually work with it. And when I first bring it in, it's editable. I can select these lines, delete individual entities, or I can actually just right-click on a layer and say delete layer and entities. And that's usually how I just get rid of things real fast. So I can take all the con layers, delete them, all the demo layers, select them all, and delete, and they're gone. It takes a little bit of time to clean it up like that, but it makes it a lot easier to read. I don't know that doing all that work in CAD would take just the same amount of time to prepare it there. So
you're not specifying, or you're not able to specify the surfaces there, like to say grass versus asphalt?
No.
What the building
well,
so you're essentially just looking at the light thrown. You're not looking at any reflection. And I know you explained that when you came to the zoning hearing board with the tennis courts and the different type of materials.
Right.
But you're not considering that when you're doing your.
when I'm doing it, no. You could. You could.
It's like if it's grass, it seems like obviously you get less trespass. Like if you had
Correct.
an issue where you were over on your trespass levels, like that might be.
I had that discussion with the lighting designer from Ace McGovern. He said grass actually could be worse for us in that case,
Yeah.
only because the blades will actually reflect differently.
So the asphalt's going to absorb more.
It could, yeah. I don't get into that much detail of it.
Because I mean the calculations are what they are, but when you have a cranky neighbor coming and saying, "Oh, they're blasting light into my property," like it seems like those kind of things really come into play, but you can't really account for them when you're doing your design.
Correct. Yeah.
You can
And-
see the building reflecting there on that left light, because the numbers on the left are
Right here.
there.
Yeah.
They're red and the ones
Yep.
are green, so you can see the difference
Yeah.
in front of the building.
And that's another thing that sometimes I have Mark and I go after. He wants to move things like just a foot. And I'm like, well, that changes the whole design because of the way that things react to each other. And I was like, and even to get certain numbers, I can go in here and say, oh, I have a really low number right here or something that I need to kind of fix. I could go in and just, so that's a fairly straight light fixture symbol. If I bump it to there, all I did was rotate that. You can't even tell that I rotated it, but it will make a difference. So let me see, that's 1.1. Nah, it did make a difference in this case. But just little tweaks that you won't be able to see in the software even on a plan will change your calculations completely. And especially when one of the calculations that's required in College Township is this average min ratio. And that has to be a 5-to-1, which is, like I said, the average has to be at least 2, and the minimum would have to be a 0.4. It's just basically that you divide the average by the minimum, and that's your answer. If it's below 5, you're good. So I might take some creative liberties to make sure I get to those ratios, especially when there's 1.1, like right here, that throws off that average. If I mask that out, everything works. And I can't imagine that a curb not having enough light on it would cause an issue.
Those requirements, College Township, do they get those from industry standards? So that those are.
Yeah, they're the only ones I know of that have actually, like, really adopted all of them. Well, no, they adopted all of them.
Oh, I see.
Everybody else makes reference to the design guide, but they just say, you should meet this, but they don't have it specifically in their ordinance.
There's the min to average. That seems to make sense.
It helps to keep the light consistent across the site.
And that's what you want.
Yeah, you don't want hot spots and dark spots. And that's the issue we had with the tennis courts, is what we couldn't get those hot spots to go away with a pole light of 12 foot, but if we made it 15 foot, it evened out but 12 foot is the maximum height that you're, or maybe it was 15 to 20. So
What are some common reasons that CAMs or clients ask to have poles moved around or fixtures moved?
hey, can we just move that light fixture over there? I don't know if there's ever a real good, I mean, maybe there's a utility that I didn't know about, or it doesn't show up really well in the, or hey, the parking lot moved, or, you know, shifted one light fixture, or one space. Okay, well, if that's the case, we probably, the light would have to move, and then therefore, or if it gets wider, or, I don't know, if the, we find out the building is not able to have a light at 12 foot, it has to be at 10 foot. You would, even that vertical change in that part could adjust the number of light fixtures we might have to put, because we'd have a dark spot. Because the higher you go, the higher you go, the wider the spread of the light, but the lower the foot candles become. The lower you go, the higher the foot candles, but it doesn't spread as much. So you kind of have to balance those two things with the light fixtures in order to get that to.
Is that why lighting happens at the very end of design?
So I don't have to repeat it again. Yeah. Because the design part, I've gotten down pretty well now, especially since I have those. For the longest time, I didn't have a go-to fixture. So I was searching for thousands of fixtures that might work. These fixtures seem to meet most of our requirements, so that's why I saved them separately. And I said, okay, these are the best fixtures that work for most of our projects. So I go with those. If you change that a little bit, you know, it just takes more time to design. Where the hassle comes in now is getting it from this software back into CAD. I've streamlined that some by learning different processes, but it still takes time. And anytime that you change something in this software, you have to go through that conversion again. And it could take a half hour just for it to automatically do the one section of the transfer.
So when we're scheduling for you to export, delete contours, clean up your layers, do the actual calcs, and then re-export, get it back into the original drawing, what's your total time, understanding that you have lots of experience? What's your
I usually estimate 4 to 5 hours. But then the weird part is that's the initial setup. If we do have changes, it still may take 2 hours to make that one change, because you have to go through the export and the adjustments to make sure everything works.
We're at an hour. Do you have questions?
Like I said, hopefully, when do we have the next session scheduled?
I want to say February 11th.
Okay. The reason why we split it apart, because I just couldn't show it. The next one will be much more technical as far as using the software, not as much design, behind the scenes design, what you need to know, why you need to know it, what you should look for. That was what I was hoping to cover today. I got some of it. But the software is, like I said, even the transfer from the software back to AutoCAD to something that we use for our plans, that's a hassle in itself. That's a whole different concept.
Is there other software available that does take terrain into account?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's not how the standards are set up. The IES standards are not set up to take into slope and vegetation. Now, I can go through here and fake things. Like I said, I can make walls and put them in certain locations. Say, hey, this wall's going to be here, but I don't know density of the leaves or the trees or whatever. You know, that they will. But I have done that. Is like large retaining walls that are right on the property. I will put a wall. The height of that retaining wall. Hopefully, if it's higher than 25 feet or higher than the light post itself. If it's not, then there's no real benefit to me to do that. No trees count.
Right, but when you're putting,
What?
you just said you might put them in.
Oh, you mean the walls? I usually typically don't. It would have to be, it would have to be,
He puts walls in for actual retaining walls on the site, not for trees.
I could put them in for trees, but it would really not be accurate. You would have a very defined line which wouldn't represent the trees.
Oh, but deciduous trees.
And they lose their leaves, right, exactly. So,
Maybe a rose
but that's,
type
But the
arborvitae
individual tree. like,
Right.
might warrant a wall, but nothing else.
yeah.
Thanks, John. It was enlightening.